My son put me in a psychiatric clinic. Father is losing his mind, says we want to kill him. The doctors believed him, but I hadn't gone crazy. I had just found his correspondence with my daughter-in-law, where they planned everything, and I managed to forward it to one person. I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I never thought I'd end up in a psychiatric ward at 73 years old, wearing a hospital gown and trying to convince doctors I wasn't insane. But there I was, strapped to a bed in Riverside Mental Health Facility, while my son Marcus stood outside the window with his wife Jennifer, both of them wearing expressions of perfectly practiced concern. Let me back up 6 months. My name is Robert Fletcher, and I'd spent 40 years building Fletcher Construction from nothing into a multi-million-dollar business. After my wife Eleanor died 3 years ago, I'd sold the company and retired to a comfortable house in Portland, Oregon. The place had 4 bedrooms, a workshop in the garage, and enough space for my son's family to visit regularly. Marcus was my only child. He'd joined a tech startup in Seattle that never quite took off, burning through his savings and mine over the years. I'd given him money, too much, probably, because that's what fathers do. His wife Jennifer worked in marketing, or at least that's what she called her sporadic freelance gigs. They had 2 kids, Emma and Tyler, 8 and 6. I loved those grandchildren fiercely. The first strange signal came in March. Marcus called, asking about my will. "Just want to make sure everything's in order, Dad," he'd said. "You're not getting any younger, and we should know where your documents are." Something in his tone felt off, but I brushed it away. He was my son. Of course he'd be concerned about practical matters. Then Jennifer started visiting more often. She'd drop by unannounced, always pleasant, always asking questions. How was I managing the house? Did I remember to take my blood pressure medication? Had I been forgetting things? The questions felt pointed, designed to plant seeds of doubt. I noticed her glancing around during these visits, her eyes lingering on the furniture, the paintings Eleanor and I had collected over the years. In April, Marcus suggested I give him power of attorney. "Just as a precaution," he'd explained over dinner at their place, "in case something happens and you can't make decisions." I'd refused firmly, and I saw something flash across his face, anger quickly masked. Jennifer had touched his arm, a calming gesture, and they'd dropped the subject. But the atmosphere had shifted. I started paying attention. I noticed how they'd exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking, how Marcus would steer conversations toward my health, my memory, my ability to manage my affairs, how Jennifer would mention nursing homes in casual conversation, always with a sympathetic tone. "They're not like they used to be, Robert. Some of them are actually quite nice." The real alarm went off in late May. I'd gone to visit them in Seattle for Tyler's birthday. Their house was modest, nothing compared to what my construction money could have provided. But that night I couldn't sleep. The guest room was hot, stuffy. I went downstairs for water and heard voices from Marcus's office. The door was cracked open. "Once we have him declared incompetent, the house is ours," Jennifer was saying. "My lawyer friend says it's straightforward with the right medical documentation." "He'll fight it," Marcus replied. "You know how stubborn he is. Not if he's already in a facility. Once he's committed, his credibility is gone. Who believes a crazy old man?" My hand froze on the glass. I stood there, hardly breathing, as they continued planning. They talked about doctors who could be convinced, about signs of dementia they'd been documenting, about my estate and how they'd liquidate it. They talked about me like I was already dead. I didn't confront them. Instead, I went back upstairs, my heart pounding, and did something I'd never done before. I opened Marcus's laptop, password still the same after all these years, and found their message thread. Everything was there. Months of planning, screenshots of my financial accounts, contact information for psychiatric facilities, draft documents declaring me mentally unfit. I forwarded it all to my old attorney, James Morrison, with a short message. Jim, I need help. We'll explain Monday. That was my mistake. I should have called him immediately. I should have left that house. Because the next morning, when I came down for breakfast, Marcus was on the phone with someone, his face grave. Jennifer was crying softly, and when he hung up, he looked at me with an expression of calculated sadness. Dad, we need to talk. We're worried about you. I'm fine, I said carefully. Last night you were wandering around confused. You came to our room saying we were trying to hurt you. Don't you remember? I stared at him. I never— You were shouting, Jennifer interrupted, her voice trembling. Saying we wanted to kill you. You scared the children, Robert. They'd set the trap, and I'd walked right into it. Within 2 hours, they had a doctor at the house, some colleague of Jennifer's, who asked me questions while Marcus and Jennifer fed him concerned commentary. Within 4 hours, I was in an ambulance. Within 6, I was in Riverside Mental Health Facility, and Marcus was signing commitment papers. That was 3 days ago. Now I lay in this bed, waiting for Jim Morrison to get my message, praying he'd check his email over the weekend. The night nurse had just given me my first injection. Something to help you rest, Mr. Fletcher. And I felt the drug pulling me under. But I wasn't crazy. I knew what I'd seen, what I'd heard, what I'd sent, and I knew that somewhere out there the evidence existed. I just had to survive long enough to use it. The medication made everything fuzzy, but it couldn't erase what I knew. I spent that first full day at Riverside cataloguing my situation, forcing my mind to work through the pharmaceutical haze. Every few hours, nurses came to check vitals, ask questions, evaluate my state. I played along, answering calmly, because the moment you resist in a place like this, you prove their point. My roommate was a man named Dale, 60-something, who'd been there for 2 weeks. He spent most of his time staring at the television, muttering about his daughter. She took everything, he'd say occasionally. They always do. I wondered how many of us in here were actually sick, and how many were just inconvenient. By the second day, the fog in my head began to lift slightly. I'd been trained as an engineer before starting my construction business. Problem-solving was in my DNA. I needed to think of this like any project. Assess resources, identify obstacles, create a timeline. What did I have? What did I need? What was working against me? Resources. I had the email I'd sent to Jim Morrison. If he'd received it, if he'd opened it, he had all the evidence. But that was a big if. It was Saturday when I'd sent it, late morning. Jim was 70 himself, recently widowed, and had mentioned he was spending weekends at his cabin in the mountains. No cell service there, no internet. He might not see the email until Monday, possibly Tuesday. I had my own mind, still sharp despite what the charts at the end of my bed probably said. I had 40 years of business experience, of negotiations, of reading people, and I had something Marcus and Jennifer didn't know about. Rage. Cold, focused rage that cut through the medication like a knife. Obstacles. I was in a psychiatric facility on a 72-hour involuntary hold, which Marcus could extend with the right documentation. Every word I said would be filtered through the assumption of mental illness. If I claimed my son was trying to steal from me, it would sound exactly like the paranoid delusions they'd already documented. The system was designed to protect vulnerable people, but that same system could be weaponized against them. Marcus had visited once, on Sunday morning. He'd brought flowers, spoken to the nurses, played the concerned son perfectly. When he came to my room, Jennifer waited outside. He sat down beside my bed, and for a moment we just looked at each other. "How are you feeling, Dad?" His voice was gentle, but his eyes were calculating. Like I've been drugged and locked up by my own son. He sighed. "There it is again." He leaned back, and I saw the trap. This conversation was probably being noted somewhere. Agitated, accusatory, paranoid. "Dad, you're not well. You need help. We're trying to help you." "Where's my phone?" I asked. Where are my clothes? My wallet? The facility has them secured. Standard procedure. I want to call my lawyer. Of course. But maybe wait until you're feeling clearer. You don't want to say something you'll regret. He patted my hand, and I had to force myself not to pull away. Just focus on getting better. That's all that matters. After he left, I lay there, thinking. He was right about one thing. I couldn't afford to lose control. Every outburst would be used against me. Every demand would be reframed as confusion or aggression. I needed to be strategic. That night, I befriended Dale properly. Asked about his daughter, his life before this place. He opened up, telling me about his own betrayal, how she'd convinced doctors he was a danger to himself. The trick, he said, is to make them think you're getting better. Smile, take the meds, don't argue, then when you're out, you fight. It was good advice, but I didn't have time for the long game. The 72 hours would end Tuesday morning. If Jim hadn't responded by then, Marcus would push for an extension, probably a 30-day evaluation. Once that happened, my credibility would be destroyed. Who would believe a man who'd spent a month in a psychiatric facility? Monday morning brought a new development. A psychiatrist named Dr. Patricia Chen came to interview me. She was professional, thorough, asking about my history, my mood, my thoughts. I told her the truth, carefully. Yes, I'd been stressed. Yes, my son and I had disagreements. No, I hadn't been hallucinating. No, I didn't want to hurt anyone. Your son says you accused him of trying to kill you, she said, reviewing her notes. I found concerning messages between him and his wife. Messages about my estate, about having me declared incompetent. When I confronted them, they called this in. May I see these messages? They're on my phone, which your staff has secured, and in an email I sent to my attorney. Dr. Chen made notes. And when did you send this email? Saturday morning, from my son's house before they brought me here. More notes. I couldn't read her expression. Was she believing me? Or was this all just confirming their diagnosis? Mr. Fletcher, I'll review your case thoroughly. We should have some answers by tomorrow. She stood, preparing to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you seem quite lucid to me. But we need to rule out organic causes for what your family reported. We'll do some cognitive tests this afternoon. After she left, I felt the first spark of hope. She hadn't dismissed me outright. That was something. I took the cognitive tests they brought. Memory exercises, pattern recognition, problem solving. I'd built a construction empire. These were child's play. That evening, I finally got access to a phone. Supervised, of course, with a nurse noting whom I called. I dialed Jim Morrison's office. Straight to voicemail. His cell phone. Voicemail. His cabin number. I still remembered it from years of friendship. No answer. I need to leave a message, I told the nurse. 2 minutes, she said. Jim, it's Robert Fletcher. I'm at Riverside Mental Health Facility. Marcus had me committed. Check your email. Saturday morning, I sent you something crucial. Please call this facility immediately. I need representation. I left the number and hung up. The nurse made notes. Your lawyer? She asked. Yes, and my friend. That's good. It's good to have support. She sounded sincere, but I knew how it would be recorded. Patient called lawyer seems convinced of persecution. Paranoid ideation. I went to bed that night with a plan forming. If Jim came through, excellent. If not, I'd need to work within the system. I'd be the model patient. I'd pass their tests. I'd be released on my own merit. And then I'd unleash hell on Marcus and Jennifer. They thought they were clever, putting me in here. They'd just given me time to think, to plan, to prepare for war. But first, I had to survive Tuesday's evaluation. I had to prove I was sane enough to leave. And I had to hope that somewhere, somehow, the truth would surface before they buried it, and me, forever. Tuesday morning arrived with unexpected news. Dr. Chen appeared at my door earlier than expected, accompanied by a man in a suit I didn't recognize. My heart rate spiked. Was this another one of Marcus's allies? But then I saw the briefcase, the professional bearing, and most importantly, the slight smile on Dr. Chen's face. "Mr. Fletcher, this is Attorney James Morrison. He's here to see you." Jim looked older than when I'd seen him last, but his eyes were sharp as ever. The moment the door closed behind Dr. Chen, he opened his briefcase. "Robert, I got your email Sunday night when I got back from the cabin. I've spent the last 36 hours reviewing everything you sent me." Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to sit down. "You believe me?" "Believe you. Robert, your son is an idiot. He and his wife documented everything in writing. It's a prosecutor's dream." He pulled out printed pages, screenshots of the messages I'd forwarded, along with additional documents. "I've already filed a motion to dissolve this hold. Judge Harrison is reviewing it now. I also contacted the Oregon State Bar about the lawyer Jennifer consulted. Turns out advising someone on how to fraudulently commit a family member is an ethics violation." "Can they keep me here?" I asked. "Not legally, not with this evidence. Dr. Chen reviewed your cognitive tests. You scored in the 98th percentile. There's no medical basis for this commitment." He leaned forward. "But Robert, we need to be strategic. If we come out swinging too hard, Marcus will destroy evidence. We need to make our next moves carefully." Dr. Chen returned with paperwork. "Mr. Fletcher, I'm recommending your immediate release. Your involuntary hold is terminated. However," she glanced at Jim, "I strongly suggest you not return to your previous living situation until this matter is resolved." "Agreed," Jim said. "I've arranged for Robert to stay at the Heathman Hotel downtown. We'll file restraining orders this afternoon." The next few hours blurred together. I signed forms, collected my possessions, changed back into my own clothes. Marcus had been notified of my release, Jim told me, and his response was telling. He demanded to speak with Dr. Chen, claimed she was making a mistake, threatened to report her to the medical board. "Desperate," I said. "Scared," Jim corrected. "He knows the walls are closing in." By early afternoon, I was in a hotel room overlooking Portland, my phone back in my hand, my freedom restored. But I wasn't celebrating yet. Jim had spread documents across the desk, printouts of Marcus and Jennifer's messages, financial records of my accounts, copies of draft commitment papers they'd prepared. "This is your proof," Jim said. "But here's what concerns me. They started this process 8 months ago. See this?" He pointed to a message from last October. "Jennifer contacted 3 different psychiatrists before finding one willing to do a house call. They've been planning this meticulously." I read through the messages chronologically, my anger building with each one. They'd discussed drugging my food to make me seem confused. They'd planned to isolate me from friends. They'd researched how to access my bank accounts once I was declared incompetent. And most chillingly, they'd discussed how much my house would sell for and how they'd split the proceeds. "There's more," Jim said quietly. "I pulled records on your recent financial activity. Someone's been using your credit cards, small purchases, nothing that would trigger alerts, but it's been going on for months. I'm betting it's Jennifer, testing whether you'd notice." "I trusted them," I said. The words felt hollow. "Marcus is my son. I know, and I'm sorry, but we need to focus on next steps." Jim pulled out a legal pad. "First, I'm filing for a restraining order preventing Marcus and Jennifer from contacting you. Second, I'm reporting the credit card fraud to the police. Third, we're changing all your passwords, account access, everything. And fourth," he paused, "we need to decide if you want to press criminal charges." What would that entail? Elder abuse, attempted fraud, false imprisonment. The DA would likely be interested, especially with this documentation. Marcus and Jennifer could face serious jail time. The vindictive part of me wanted to say yes immediately. But I thought about Emma and Tyler, my grandchildren. They were innocent in this. Whatever happened to their parents would scar them. "Let's start with the restraining order," I said. "We can escalate if needed." That evening, while Jim worked on legal filings, I sat in my hotel room and called my brother's daughter, Claire. She lived in Chicago, but we'd always been close. When I told her what had happened, she was quiet for a long moment. "Uncle Robert, I'm not surprised," she finally said. "Marcus called me 3 months ago, asking questions about you. Whether I'd noticed you forgetting things, acting strange. I thought it was weird, but I figured he was just worried. He was building a case." I said, "I should have warned you. I'm sorry. You couldn't have known. But Claire, I need you to do something for me. If anything happens, if this escalates and I need someone to corroborate my story, will you testify to that phone call?" "Absolutely. And Uncle Robert, fight them. Don't let them win." After we hung up, I stood at the window, watching the city lights. Jim was right. Marcus and Jennifer were scared now. They'd lost control of the situation. But scared people were dangerous. They'd already shown they were willing to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. What else would they do to protect themselves? My phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Dad?" Marcus's voice was tight. "What the hell did you do?" "I protected myself. Something you made necessary." "This is insane. You're destroying our family over a misunderstanding." "I read the messages, Marcus, all of them. I know exactly what you and Jennifer planned." Silence. Then, "Dad, listen. We can fix this. We were just worried about you, trying to figure out what would happen if you couldn't manage things yourself. It wasn't malicious. You discussed drugging me. You talked about selling my house before I was even dead. You had me locked in a psychiatric ward." My voice was cold. "There's no talking your way out of this. You're going to regret this," he said, and now his voice had changed. The mask was off. "You think you can humiliate us? Destroy my reputation? I'll fight you on everything. The grandkids? You'll never see them again. Your friends? I'll tell them all you've lost your mind. By the time I'm done..." I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from fury. Jim had heard the conversation on speakerphone. He was already making notes. "That was a threat," he said. "Document everything. Save that call record. He'll try to retaliate." I said, "Let him try. Every move he makes now just gives us more ammunition." Jim closed his briefcase. "Get some rest, Robert. Tomorrow we file everything, and then it's out of your hands and into the legal systems. Trust the process." But as I lay in bed that night, I knew the process was just beginning. Marcus and Jennifer had revealed their true nature. They wouldn't go quietly. They'd fight, manipulate, possibly try to escalate. I'd won the first battle by getting out of Riverside, but the war was just starting. And I was ready for it. Wednesday morning, Jim and I went to the courthouse. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m., and I'd dressed carefully. Suit and tie, clean-shaven, every inch the competent businessman I'd been for 4 decades. Perception mattered now. I needed judges, clerks, everyone who saw me to think, "This man is clearly not mentally incompetent." Marcus and Jennifer were already there with their own attorney, a sharp-looking woman named Diane Westfield. Jennifer's eyes were red, as if she'd been crying. Marcus looked haggard. Good. Let them feel the pressure. Judge Barbara Thornton reviewed the case quickly. Jim presented our evidence, the messages, the fraudulent commitment, the financial irregularities. Marcus's attorney tried to frame it as a family misunderstanding, adult children genuinely concerned about an aging parent. "Your Honor, Mr. Fletcher was displaying concerning behaviors," Westfield argued. "My clients acted out of love and fear for his safety." Judge Thornton looked at her over her reading glasses. "Miss Westfield, your clients discussed in writing how to fraudulently declare him incompetent and seize his assets. That's not concern. That's conspiracy." She signed the order. "Mr. Marcus Fletcher and Mrs. Jennifer Fletcher are hereby restrained from contacting Robert Fletcher directly or indirectly. 500 feet minimum distance. This includes phone calls, emails, text messages, and third-party communications. Violation will result in immediate arrest. We left the courthouse victorious, but I felt no joy. This was my son. Whatever he'd become, I'd helped raise him. Some part of me kept hoping he'd realize what he'd done, apologize, try to make amends. But I knew better. Marcus didn't apologize. He doubled down. That afternoon, I met with Detective Sarah Gonzalez at Portland Police Bureau's Financial Crimes Unit. She was thorough, professional, and clearly disturbed by what she read. "Mr. Fletcher, this is textbook elder abuse," she said. "The credit card fraud alone is prosecutable. Combined with the attempted conservatorship fraud, we're looking at multiple felonies. What happens next?" I asked. "I'll open an investigation. We'll need to interview your son and daughter-in-law formally. I'll also contact the psychiatrist who did the house call, Dr. Ronald Stevens. If he knowingly participated in fraudulent commitment, he's facing his own problems." By Thursday, the situation escalated. My phone rang constantly with blocked numbers. When I finally answered one, Jennifer's voice came through, hysterical. "You're destroying us. Marcus lost his job because your lawyer contacted his employer. Do you understand what you've done?" "I understand you tried to steal everything from me," I said. "You made your choices. We have children. Emma and Tyler need their father. How can you be so cruel?" "You should have thought about that before you planned to drug me and lock me away." She screamed something incomprehensible and hung up. Minutes later, Marcus's attorney called Jim, threatening a defamation lawsuit. We'd damaged his reputation, she claimed. We'd interfered with his employment. We owed him damages. Jim laughed when he told me. "They're desperate. Defamation requires false statements. Everything we've presented is documented truth." Friday brought a new problem. I arrived at my bank to change account passwords and found my accounts temporarily frozen. The manager, Ted Wilson, looked uncomfortable as he explained. "Mr. Fletcher, your son filed a complaint with Adult Protective Services, claiming you're being financially exploited by your attorney. They've requested we freeze your accounts pending investigation." "That's absurd," Jim said. "I'm his lawyer, not his conservator. He has full control of his finances." "I understand, but we have to comply with APS requests. It should be resolved within a few days." Outside, I wanted to punch something. "They're trying to cut off my resources," I said. "If I can't access my money, I can't pay you. Can't pay for the hotel." "Robert, stop. I've got you covered. This is harassment and it'll backfire on them." Jim made notes on his phone. "Every false report they file just adds to our case. They're digging their own graves." But that night, alone in my hotel room, I felt the weight of it all. I was 73 years old, fighting my own son in court, sleeping in a hotel instead of my own home, watching my family disintegrate in real time. Was this worth it? Should I just let them have the money, sign over the house, retreat to some small apartment and live out my years in peace? Then I remembered the messages. The casual way they'd discussed drugging me. The calculations about how much they'd get when I died. The laughter in Jennifer's words when she wrote, "Old people are easy to manipulate." No, this was about more than money or property. This was about dignity, about refusing to be a victim, about showing Marcus that betrayal had consequences. Saturday morning, I made a decision. I called Claire again and asked her to reach out to other family members, my cousins, old friends, people who'd known Marcus growing up. I needed allies, people who could testify to my competence if this went to trial. She agreed immediately. Then I did something harder. I wrote letters to Emma and Tyler. They were too young to understand fully, but someday they'd be old enough to ask questions about why they didn't see their grandfather anymore. I wanted them to have my side of the story, written in my own hand, explaining that I loved them but couldn't allow their parents to destroy me. Jim advised against it. Don't contact them in any way. It could be seen as violating the spirit of the restraining order. The order prevents Marcus and Jennifer from contacting me. It doesn't prevent me from leaving letters in a safe deposit box for my grandchildren to receive when they're 18. I sealed the letters. I'm thinking long-term, Jim. This isn't over, and I won't have Marcus controlling the narrative forever. Sunday. I took my first real rest. Jim insisted I needed to decompress, maintain my health. I walked through Forest Park, breathing cold November air, trying to remember who I'd been before this nightmare started. What did I enjoy? What made me happy? For months, I'd been so focused on Marcus's betrayal that I'd forgotten to live my own life. I had dinner at a small Italian restaurant, read a book I'd been meaning to finish for years, went to bed early. The calm wouldn't last. I knew that. Marcus and Jennifer would try something else. They were cornered animals now, and cornered animals were the most dangerous. But I'd survived their first attacks. I'd gathered evidence, secured legal representation, protected my assets. Now I just needed to wait for the legal system to work. Detective Gonzalez was investigating. Judge Thornton was on record recognizing their fraud. My accounts would be unfrozen once APS interviewed me. The pieces were moving into place. And when they finally fell, Marcus and Jennifer would learn what it meant to underestimate a man who'd built an empire from nothing. I'd spent 40 years in construction. I knew how to tear things down, too. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was having breakfast in the hotel restaurant when a woman approached my table. She introduced herself as Diane Westfield, Marcus's attorney. Without Jim present, I should have asked her to leave. Instead, curiosity made me gesture to the empty chair. 5 minutes, I said, and I'm recording this conversation. I placed my phone on the table between us. She smiled tightly. Fair enough. Mr. Fletcher, I'm here because my clients are willing to negotiate a settlement. There's nothing to negotiate. They committed crimes. That's one interpretation. Another is that 2 worried children made some mistakes while trying to protect an aging father. The court could see it either way. She pulled out a folder. They're offering to drop the APS complaint. They'll make a public apology, and they're willing to attend family therapy to repair the relationship. In exchange for what? You drop the restraining order. You decline to cooperate with the criminal investigation, and you sign over 50% of your estate to Marcus as an early inheritance. I laughed. I couldn't help it. They try to steal everything, fail, and now they want half, as a reward for not succeeding in their fraud? They have children to support. Marcus lost his job because of your attorney's interference. Marcus lost his job because his employer learned he committed elder abuse. That's not interference. That's consequences. I stood. Tell your clients no. Tell them I'll see them in court. And tell them every time they file a false report or make a threat, they're adding to the evidence against them. She left without another word. I sat back down, my appetite gone. They were trying to negotiate because they were scared. Good, let them sweat. That afternoon, I met with Adult Protective Services. The caseworker, Maria Hernandez, was professional but skeptical, clearly expecting to find a confused elderly man being manipulated by an opportunistic lawyer. Instead, she got me, with a file folder of evidence and a clear timeline of events. Mr. Fletcher, I've reviewed the complaint filed by your son. He claims Attorney Morrison has isolated you from family and is controlling your finances. My son tried to have me fraudulently committed to a psychiatric facility so he could steal my estate. I hired Attorney Morrison to protect myself. Here's the evidence. I walked her through everything. The messages, the false commitment, the credit card fraud. By the end, Maria was making rapid notes. Mr. Fletcher, I need to be clear. This complaint appears to be retaliatory and false. I'll be recommending immediate closure of this case and filing a report about abuse of the APS system. Your accounts should be unfrozen by tomorrow. Thank you, I said. And Ms. Hernandez, how often does this happen? Adult children falsely reporting their parents? More than you'd think, and it's getting worse. She closed her file. The system is designed to protect vulnerable adults, but some people have learned to weaponize it. I'm sorry this happened to you. After she left, I felt vindicated. Every institution Marcus and Jennifer had tried to turn against me was now seeing through their lies. But vindication wasn't enough. I needed community. I needed people around me who weren't lawyers or investigators or judges. That evening, I called my old business partner, Frank Chen. We'd sold the company together 3 years ago and stayed friends, though we'd drifted apart after Eleanor's death. When I explained what had happened, his response was immediate. "Robert, why didn't you call me sooner? You shouldn't be going through this alone. I didn't want to burden anyone." "Burden? We built a company together for 20 years. Your family." He paused. "Patricia and I are coming to Portland this weekend. We're taking you out, and you're going to tell us everything." I felt something loosen in my chest. I'd been so focused on the legal battle that I'd forgotten I wasn't alone in the world. That night, I made more calls. To my cousin Margaret in Boston, to my old friend Sam from the Chamber of Commerce, to Eleanor's sister Ruth, who'd always treated me like a brother. Each conversation followed a similar pattern. Shock at what Marcus had done, anger on my behalf, and most importantly, unconditional support. Ruth even said, "Eleanor would be so proud of you for fighting back. She always said Marcus was too entitled. Looks like she was right." Tuesday brought more good news. My bank accounts were unfrozen. Detective Gonzalez called to say she'd interviewed Dr. Ronald Stevens, the psychiatrist who'd done the house call, and he'd admitted Jennifer had misrepresented my symptoms. "He's cooperating fully to save his license," she said, "and his testimony will be crucial for the prosecution. Wednesday." Something shifted. I was having lunch with Jim when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Grandpa, it's Emma. Mom took my phone, but I got Dad's old one. I miss you. Why can't we visit? Tyler is crying every night." My throat tightened. I showed Jim. "Don't respond," he said immediately. "It's a trap. Either it's actually Jennifer pretending to be Emma, or Marcus is having her text you to prove you're violating the restraining order." "She's 8 years old. She doesn't understand what's happening." "I know. But Robert, one response and they'll twist it into harassment of a minor. You'll lose credibility." He put his hand on my arm. "I'm sorry. I know this is the hardest part, but you have to think long term. When this is over, when Marcus and Jennifer have faced consequences, you can rebuild your relationship with those kids. But not now. Not while their parents are looking for any excuse to hurt you." I put the phone away without responding. Jim was right, but it felt like cutting off part of my soul. Emma and Tyler had nothing to do with their parents' crimes. They were innocent, and they were suffering. That night, Frank and Patricia arrived in Portland. We had dinner at a steakhouse, and for 3 hours, I got to feel normal. We talked about old times, funny stories from the construction days, mutual friends. They asked about my health, my plans for the future. Real questions, not veiled accusations. "I'm thinking about traveling," I said. "Once this is resolved, maybe Europe. Eleanor and I always wanted to spend a month in Italy." "Do it," Patricia said. "Life's too short, Robert, and you've earned it." Frank raised his glass. "To Robert Fletcher. Toughest son of a bitch I ever worked with. Your kid made a big mistake thinking he could take you down." We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not just hope for legal victory, but hope for life after this. I'd been so consumed by the fight that I'd forgotten there was a future waiting. Travel. Hobbies. Maybe even new relationships. I was 73, not dead. Friday, Jim called with an update. "The DA is moving forward with charges. Elder abuse, fraud, false imprisonment. Marcus and Jennifer will be arraigned next week." "Will they go to jail?" I asked. Unlikely at first. Probably bail and release. But if convicted, yes. Marcus could face 3 to 5 years. Jennifer 2 to 4. I thought about Emma and Tyler. About what it would mean for them to have both parents in prison. Then I thought about those messages. About being strapped to a bed in Riverside. About the casual cruelty in Jennifer's words. "Good," I said. They made their choices. That weekend, I moved out of the hotel and into a furnished apartment Jim had found. It was temporary, but it felt like progress. I was rebuilding my life piece by piece. The legal system was working, my support system was strong, and Marcus and Jennifer were running out of options. But I knew them. I knew how desperate they were, how much they had to lose. They'd try something else. One last attempt to flip the script, to make me the villain, to escape consequences. I was ready for it. Whatever came next, I'd face it with the same cold determination that had carried me this far. They'd started this war. I was going to finish it. The arraignment was scheduled for Monday. Sunday evening, I was in my new apartment, preparing documents for the week ahead, when someone knocked on my door. I checked the peephole and froze. Marcus and Jennifer stood in the hallway, both looking haggard but determined. They were violating the restraining order just by being here. I should have called the police immediately. Instead, I opened the door with my phone in hand, recording. "You have 10 seconds to leave before I have you both arrested," I said. "Dad, please, just hear us out." Marcus held up his hands in a placating gesture. "We came to apologize, to try to fix this before tomorrow destroys everything. You should have thought about that before you tried to have me locked up. We were wrong. I know that now. We panicked, made terrible decisions." His voice cracked convincingly. "But Dad, think about Emma and Tyler. If we go to prison, what happens to them? They'll end up in foster care. Is that what you want? Your grandchildren in the system because you couldn't forgive your son?" Jennifer stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Robert, I'm begging you. I know I messed up. I was desperate. We were drowning in debt, and I thought if we just had access to some of your money, we could get back on our feet. It was wrong. I see that now. So your plan was to lock me in a psychiatric facility and steal everything I'd worked for? That was your solution to debt?" I kept my voice level. "Get out of my apartment." "We'll pay you back," Marcus said quickly. "Every penny we took from the credit cards. We'll get jobs, work double shifts. Just drop the charges, please, for your grandchildren." I studied their faces. Marcus looked sincere. He always could fake emotion when necessary. Jennifer's tears seemed real, but then again, she'd cried convincingly at Riverside too. This was theater, a last desperate attempt to manipulate me using the one weapon they thought would work: my love for Emma and Tyler. "You're using your children as shields," I said. "You committed crimes, and now you're hiding behind 2 innocent kids. We're their parents." Jennifer's voice rose. "You want them to grow up without us? To visit their mom and dad in prison? That's cruel, Robert. That's vindictive." Vindictive was planning to drug me. Vindictive was laughing about how easy old people are to manipulate. Don't talk to me about cruelty when I have your messages memorized. Marcus's expression changed. The mask slipped, and I saw the anger underneath. "You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so perfect? You were never there when I was growing up. Always working, always at the office. Mom raised me alone while you built your precious company." "Here it is," I said. "The real reason. You think I owe you because I worked hard to provide for this family? You owe me because I'm your son. I should have inherited everything naturally, but no. You had to hold on to every penny like some miser. Well, guess what? We tried to take what should have been ours anyway. Should have been yours? I built that company with my hands, my mind, 40 years of my life. You've done nothing but burn through money and blame everyone else for your failures." Jennifer grabbed Marcus's arm, trying to pull him back, but he shook her off. "You want to send us to prison? Fine. But when Emma and Tyler ask why their grandfather destroyed their family, I'll make sure they know the truth. That you cared more about money than your own grandchildren. They'll know the truth, all right. They'll know their parents tried to steal from a 73-year-old man and got caught. They'll know you used them as emotional blackmail, and they'll know I loved them enough to not let them grow up thinking betrayal and fraud are acceptable." Marcus stepped closer, and for a moment I thought he might physically attack me. His fists were clenched, his face flushed. "You're going to regret this. We'll appeal. We'll drag this out for years. We'll bleed you dry in legal fees. We'll make your life so miserable you'll wish you died before any of this started. Get out of my apartment, now, or I'm calling 911 and having you arrested for violating a restraining order." Jennifer pulled Marcus back towards the door. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You think you've won. We'll find a way to fight back. There are always ways." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." She looked at me with pure hatred. "You took everything from us, our dignity, our future, our children's stability. You'll pay for that, Robert, one way or another." They left, and I immediately called Jim, then 911. Within 20 minutes, police arrived to take my statement. I sent them the recording. An officer explained that Marcus and Jennifer would be arrested for restraining order violation, which would also impact their bail status for the criminal charges. "They threatened you on recording," the officer said. "That's not going to help their case." After everyone left, I sat in the silence of my apartment, and for the first time since this started, I felt genuine fear. Not of the legal system, or the charges, or even of losing money. I feared what desperate people might do. Marcus and Jennifer had already shown they were willing to go to extreme lengths. What would they do now that they were truly cornered? I thought about changing apartments again, not telling anyone where I was. But that would be letting them win, letting fear control my choices. No, I'd installed security cameras, changed my locks, notified building security about the restraining order. I'd taken precautions. I couldn't live in terror of my own son. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made me tense. Every car alarm outside had me checking the windows. By morning, I was exhausted, but also strangely calm. The fear had transformed into something harder, colder. They wanted to threaten me? Let them try. Every threat just added to the prosecution's case. At the Monday arraignment, Marcus and Jennifer appeared in handcuffs due to the restraining order violation. They pleaded not guilty to all charges. The judge, unimpressed by their Sunday night visit to my apartment, increased their bail and added electronic monitoring as a condition of release. "Your clients seem to have trouble following court orders," Judge Thornton said to their attorney. "If they violate the restraining order again, bail will be revoked and they'll await trial in custody. Make sure they understand that." Outside the courthouse, Jim was satisfied. "They shot themselves in the foot. The jury will see that recording. 2 people going to their elderly father's apartment to threaten and manipulate him. That plays exactly into our narrative." "They're going to try something else," I said. "They're not going to just wait for trial. Let them try. They're being monitored now. Any move they make, we'll know about it." Jim checked his watch. "Go home, Robert. Rest. We've got them on the ropes." But I couldn't rest. That recording played in my mind on repeat. The venom in Jennifer's voice, the barely contained violence in Marcus's posture. These weren't people who would accept defeat gracefully. They'd fight until the very end, and they'd use any weapon they could find. I spent the evening reinforcing my defenses. I documented everything, every asset, every password, every important document. I made copies and stored them with Frank, with Jim, with my bank. If Marcus and Jennifer tried to destroy evidence or hack my accounts, they'd fail. And I made a decision. I wouldn't just defend. I would push forward aggressively. I'd give interviews to local news if the DA approved it. I'd make sure everyone knew what they'd done. I'd let other elderly people see that fighting back was possible, that family betrayal didn't have to end in victimhood. Marcus and Jennifer wanted war. They were about to learn what war with a man who'd built an empire looked like. I'd spent 40 years outmaneuvering competitors, winning contracts, crushing business rivals. They were amateurs, and I was going to show them exactly how outmatched they were. The trial began on a cold January morning. 6 weeks had passed since the arraignment, 6 weeks of preparation, depositions, and mounting evidence. The prosecution had built an airtight case. I was ready. More than ready. I was eager to finally face Marcus and Jennifer in a setting where truth mattered, where manipulation couldn't work. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. District Attorney Amanda Walsh sat at the prosecution table with her team. Diane Westfield represented Marcus and Jennifer, who sat together, looking appropriately remorseful for the jury. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution, Jim beside me. "Remember," Jim whispered as the judge entered. "Stay calm. They'll try to paint you as a vengeful old man. Don't give them ammunition." Judge Raymond Torres called the court to order. The jury, 8 women, 4 men, ranging from their 30s to 60s, watched everything with focused attention. D.A. Walsh gave her opening statement, laying out the timeline methodically. The planning messages, the credit card fraud, the fraudulent commitment, the threats. "This isn't a case about family disagreement," she told the jury. "This is a case about 2 people who saw an elderly man as an obstacle to wealth and decided to remove that obstacle by any means necessary, including having him locked in a psychiatric facility based on lies." Westfield's opening was predictable. She painted Marcus and Jennifer as concerned children, overwhelmed by genuine worry about an aging father showing signs of decline. Every action, she claimed, came from love and fear, not greed. My clients made mistakes, yes, but their intentions were pure. They saw their father struggling and tried to help. Was their approach perfect? No, but it was driven by family loyalty, not criminal intent. The first 2 days were technical. Financial experts testifying about the credit card fraud, medical experts explaining that my cognitive tests showed no impairment. Detective Gonzalez walked through her investigation, cool and professional. On day 3, Dr. Patricia Chen took the stand. She explained how Marcus had reported I was violent, delusional, a danger to myself and others. But when I evaluated Mr. Fletcher, I found none of those symptoms. He was lucid, rational, and scored exceptionally well on cognitive assessments. I found no medical justification for his commitment. "Did you find that unusual?" D.A. Walsh asked. "Very. Most involuntary commitments are legitimate cases where families are genuinely concerned. This appeared to be something else entirely." Westfield cross-examined aggressively. "But doctor, isn't it possible Mr. Fletcher was having a lucid interval during your assessment, that he'd been delusional earlier?" "Possible, but extremely unlikely. The pattern didn't fit, and when I reviewed the messages between Marcus Fletcher and his wife, it became clear this was coordinated." "Objection." Westfield stood. "Those messages are taken out of context." "Overruled," Judge Torres said. "The messages are evidence. Continue, Dr. Chen." On day 4, they played the recording from Sunday night at my apartment. The jury listened in silence as Marcus's voice filled the courtroom. "We tried to take what should have been ours anyway." Jennifer's threat. "You'll pay for that, Robert. One way or another." I watched the jury's faces. Several looked disturbed. One older woman was shaking her head. This was the moment they stopped seeing Marcus and Jennifer as worried children and started seeing them as criminals. Day 5, I took the stand. D.A. Walsh led me through my testimony carefully. I explained my relationship with Marcus, how I'd supported him financially for years. I described finding the messages, the horror of reading their plans, the terror of being committed to Riverside, helpless and drugged, while they moved forward with their scheme. "Mr. Fletcher, when you discovered what your son was planning, why didn't you confront him immediately?" Walsh asked. "Because I knew he'd deny it. I needed proof, so I forwarded the evidence to my attorney before Marcus and Jennifer realized I'd found it." "And how did you feel when you woke up in Riverside Mental Health Facility?" I looked at the jury. Betrayed. Terrified. I'd spent my whole life building something to leave for my family, and my son repaid me by trying to take everything while I was still alive. Worse, he tried to take my freedom, my dignity, my mind. He wanted people to think I was crazy, so no one would believe me when I accused him. Westfield's cross-examination tried to poke holes in my story. Mr. Fletcher, isn't it true you have a history of conflict with your son? We've had disagreements. What family hasn't? Isn't it true you disapproved of his career choices? I supported Marcus through multiple failed businesses. I gave him over $200,000 over the years. And you resented that, didn't you? I resented that he never succeeded, yes. But I didn't stop loving him. I didn't try to destroy him. That's the difference between us. Mr. Fletcher, you're asking this jury to believe your own son tried to steal from you. Isn't it possible you misinterpreted? No. I kept my voice calm. I didn't misinterpret Jennifer writing, "Once we have him declared incompetent, the house is ours." I didn't misinterpret Marcus saying, "Who believes a crazy old man?" Those are their words, Ms. Westfield, in writing, not my interpretation, their confession. She tried a few more approaches, but I didn't waver. Jim had prepped me well. Stay calm. Stick to facts. Don't let anger show. By the time I left the stand, I felt the jury believed me. On day 6, Marcus took the stand. His attorney had coached him well. He looked appropriately regretful, spoke softly, maintained eye contact with the jury. I was scared. He testified. My father was acting strange, forgetting things, getting angry over nothing. I thought he was developing dementia. And the messages the prosecution keeps mentioning. Westfield asked, taken out of context. Jennifer and I were discussing what would happen if Dad became incompetent. We were trying to prepare, to understand our legal options. We never intended to fake anything. D.A. Walsh's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Fletcher, you testified you were concerned about your father's mental state. When did you first notice these concerns? Around last October. And yet you didn't take him to a doctor. You didn't suggest therapy. You didn't contact Adult Protective Services. Instead, you researched how to have him declared incompetent. Why? I was trying to understand the process. You wrote, and I quote, "Once we have him declared incompetent, the house is ours." That doesn't sound like concern. That sounds like a plan. I phrased it badly. I was stressed. You also wrote, "We should start small. Use his credit cards. See if he notices." Did you use your father's credit cards without permission? Marcus hesitated. A few times. But I planned to pay him back. Did you? Not yet. But yes or no, Mr. Fletcher. Did you use your father's credit cards without permission and not pay him back? Yes. That's theft. And you did this while supposedly concerned about his mental health. Marcus fumbled for an answer. His composure was cracking. I needed the money. We were desperate. So desperate you considered drugging your father to make him seem confused? That was just talk. We never actually... You wrote, "If we put some of my Ambien in his coffee, he'll seem disoriented." That's not just talk. That's conspiracy. I didn't mean it. But you wrote it. You discussed it with your wife. You researched psychiatric facilities. You contacted a doctor willing to do a house call. You documented false symptoms. And when your father forwarded evidence of your plan, you had him involuntarily committed within hours. That's not concern, Mr. Fletcher. That's covering your tracks. By the time Marcus left the stand, he was sweating, his carefully maintained facade destroyed. The jury had seen him falter, contradict himself, admit to theft. He looked exactly like what he was, a man caught in his own lies. Jennifer's testimony on day 7 was worse. She cried throughout, but the tears felt calculated. She claimed everything was Marcus's idea, that she'd just gone along with it. But when D.A. Walsh played recordings of her phone calls, the threats, the manipulations, her story fell apart. Mrs. Fletcher, you told your husband's employer that Robert Fletcher was mentally incompetent and dangerous. Why? I was trying to protect Marcus. From what? From the consequences of committing elder abuse? From his father's vindictiveness. So you lied to damage Robert Fletcher's credibility? You tried to destroy his reputation? I was scared. You were covering your crimes, and when that didn't work, you went to his apartment and threatened him. You'll pay for that, Robert. Those were your words. What did you mean?" Jennifer couldn't answer. She just cried, and I saw the jury's faces harden. They'd lost sympathy. These weren't worried children. They were predators who'd gotten caught. The closing arguments were formalities. D.A. Walsh laid out the evidence piece by piece, building an undeniable case. Westfield tried valiantly to resurrect the concerned children narrative, but it rang hollow after a week of testimony. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of elder abuse, we find the defendant Marcus Fletcher guilty. On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant Marcus Fletcher guilty. On the charge of false imprisonment, guilty. Guilty on every count, both of them. Marcus stared straight ahead, his face blank. Jennifer sobbed. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. This was justice. Pure, simple, necessary justice. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. I'd expected relief after the guilty verdict, but instead I felt hollow. This was my son. No matter what he'd done, part of me still remembered the little boy who'd run to hug me when I came home from work, who'd wanted to be just like his dad when he grew up. Where had that boy gone? When had he transformed into this stranger who'd tried to destroy me? But when Marcus and Jennifer entered the courtroom for sentencing, any lingering sympathy evaporated. They showed no remorse. Marcus glared at me with pure hatred. Jennifer wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. They'd learned nothing. Judge Torres reviewed the case thoroughly before pronouncing sentence. This court has seen many cases of elder abuse, but few as calculated and cruel as this one. You didn't just steal from your father, Mr. Fletcher. You tried to erase his autonomy, his credibility, his very sense of reality. You weaponized the mental health system against him. You turned institutions meant to protect vulnerable people into tools of exploitation. He looked at the defense table. Ms. Westfield has argued for leniency, citing your children and your lack of criminal history. But the evidence shows this was not an impulsive act. You planned this for months. You researched. You coordinated. You executed a deliberate scheme to defraud and imprison an elderly man whose only crime was trusting you. The sentence was harsh. Marcus received 5 years in state prison, with possibility of parole after 3. Jennifer received 4 years, parole after 2. Both were ordered to pay full restitution. Not just the credit card charges, but my legal fees, medical bills from Riverside, and compensation for emotional distress. The total exceeded $600,000. Additionally, Judge Torres continued, you are both prohibited from any contact with Robert Fletcher for 15 years following your release. You will surrender all claims to his estate, and you will register as perpetrators of elder abuse, which will be visible in background checks for employment and housing. Marcus's face went white. Jennifer started crying again, but this time they weren't manipulative tears. They were the tears of someone finally understanding the magnitude of what they'd lost. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. The case had attracted media attention. A wealthy retiree fighting back against his own children made for compelling news. D.A. Walsh gave a brief statement, then indicated I could speak if I wanted. I stepped to the microphones. My name is Robert Fletcher. 6 months ago, my son tried to have me locked in a psychiatric facility so he could steal my estate. He failed because I fought back. I'm speaking today because I know I'm not the only person this has happened to. Elder abuse is everywhere. It happens in families that seem normal. It happens to people who think they're safe because they trust their children. I looked directly at the cameras. If someone is trying to exploit you, document everything. Get a good attorney. Report it to police. Don't be ashamed. Don't protect people who are hurting you, even if they're family. Family is supposed to protect you. If they're doing the opposite, they've broken that bond, not you. A reporter called out, "Do you think your son and daughter-in-law deserve prison time?" I think they deserve exactly what they got. Consequences. They committed serious crimes. The sentence is appropriate. Will you ever forgive them? I paused. Forgiveness isn't something I can manufacture. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm focused on rebuilding my life and making sure other elderly people know they have rights, they have options, and they don't have to be victims. Jim walked me to his car. You did good in there. That statement will help a lot of people. I hope so. I felt exhausted. What happens now? Now? You get your life back. The restraining order is permanent. They're going to prison. Your estate is protected. You're free, Robert. Free. The word felt strange. I'd been fighting for so long, living in survival mode, that I'd forgotten what freedom felt like. That night, in my apartment, I allowed myself to finally breathe. I poured a glass of Eleanor's favorite wine, a bottle I'd been saving, and toasted to her. I did it, I said to her photograph on my shelf. I didn't let them win. Over the following weeks, the consequences for Marcus and Jennifer multiplied. Their house went into foreclosure. They couldn't afford the mortgage without income. Emma and Tyler went to live with Jennifer's sister in California. The children's services caseworker I spoke with assured me they'd be fine, but I ached for them nonetheless. Marcus's former employer sent me a letter of apology, explaining they'd been manipulated by Jennifer's false reports. They'd included a check for my legal fees, a gesture of goodwill I hadn't expected. Frank and Patricia invited me to stay with them in Chicago for a while, to decompress and start planning my future. But the most satisfying consequence came from an unexpected source. Dr. Ronald Stevens, the psychiatrist who'd done the house call, lost his medical license. The state board found he'd violated ethical standards by participating in a fraudulent commitment. His testimony during the trial, where he'd admitted Jennifer had lied to him about my symptoms, had sealed his fate. Good, I told Jim when he called with the news. He enabled this. He should face consequences too. 6 months after the sentencing, I sold my Portland house. Too many bad memories. Instead, I bought a condo in Chicago, near Frank and Patricia. I joined a book club, started taking Italian lessons, preparing for that trip to Italy Eleanor and I had always planned, and began consulting part-time with young construction entrepreneurs. Life was good. Better than good. It was peaceful. I woke up without fear. I went to bed without checking locks 3 times. I didn't flinch when unknown numbers called. The trauma was fading, replaced by something stronger. The knowledge that I'd fought and won. One afternoon, Claire called. Uncle Robert, I thought you should know. Jennifer's sister reached out. Emma and Tyler have been asking about you. My heart clenched. What did you tell her? That you love them. That none of this was your fault, and that maybe someday when they're older, you can have a relationship again. She understood. She said their mum and dad poisoned them against you, but she's working to undo that damage. Thank you, I said. Tell her I'll wait as long as it takes. Those kids deserve better than the parents they got. Later that year, I got a letter from Marcus. It had been forwarded through Jim, who'd reviewed it first to make sure it wasn't a threat. It was short. Dad, I know you probably won't read this. I know I have no right to ask for anything. But I want you to know I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry for what I did. Prison has given me a lot of time to think about who I became. I was jealous of your success, resentful that you always made things look easy. I blamed you for my failures instead of taking responsibility. And when I saw an opportunity to take what I wanted, I convinced myself I deserved it. I was wrong about everything. I destroyed my family, hurt my children, and betrayed the one person who always supported me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know I finally understand what I did. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I read it 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and didn't respond. Maybe someday I'd be ready to write back. Maybe someday I'd be able to separate the man who wrote that letter from the man who'd tried to destroy me. But not yet. For now I was focusing on my own life, on joy, on peace, on the future I'd almost lost. Marcus and Jennifer had tried to steal everything from me. Instead, they'd given me something unexpected. The knowledge that I was stronger than I'd ever realized, that I could fight when necessary, that I could survive betrayal and come out on the other side intact. They'd lost everything. Freedom, reputation, their children, their future. I'd lost a son, but I'd kept my dignity. In the end, that was the only thing that truly mattered. A year after the sentencing, I stood in the Tuscan countryside, looking out over rolling hills covered in cypress trees and vineyards. I'd finally made it to Italy. The trip Eleanor and I had always dreamed about. I'd brought her ashes with me, scattered them in a garden in Florence where we'd once talked about retiring. We made it, love, I'd whispered as I let her go. The trip was everything I'd hoped. I ate incredible food, learned enough Italian to have basic conversations, took cooking classes in a medieval villa. I visited museums, walked through ancient ruins, sat in piazzas drinking espresso and watching life happen around me. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy. I wasn't alone either. Frank and Patricia had joined me for the first 2 weeks. Claire flew over for the third. And in Rome, I'd met a woman named Angela, a widow from Boston, who was also traveling solo. We'd struck up a conversation at the Trevi Fountain and ended up spending 3 days exploring the city together. Nothing romantic, just companionship, laughter, the pleasure of connecting with someone who understood loss and renewal. You have a lightness about you, Angela told me over dinner our last night together. Like you've made peace with something difficult. I have, I said. I fought the hardest battle of my life, and I won. Now I'm learning how to live again. Back in Chicago, I'd settled into a routine I loved. Mornings at the gym, keeping my 74-year-old body strong. Afternoons consulting with young entrepreneurs. I'd found I enjoyed mentoring, sharing 4 decades of business wisdom. Evenings with friends, at the theater, at restaurants, living fully. I'd also started a foundation. The Fletcher Fund for Elder Rights provided legal assistance to elderly people facing exploitation by family members. We'd helped 12 people so far, covering legal fees, connecting them with resources, supporting them through the same nightmare I'd survived. Each case we won felt like another victory over Marcus and Jennifer's legacy of betrayal. You're doing important work, Jim told me during one of his visits. He'd semi-retired and was spending more time with his grandchildren, but we stayed close. These people need advocates. I needed advocates, I said. You, Frank, Claire, Detective Gonzalez, Dr. Chen, I was lucky to have people who believed me. Not everyone does. One afternoon I got a call from Jennifer's sister, Karen. I'd spoken with her a few times about Emma and Tyler, always keeping the conversations brief and factual. Robert, I thought you should know. Emma found the letters you wrote, the ones you'd put in the safe deposit box for when she turned 18. My chest tightened. She's only 9. How did she... She went snooping in my office, found the key, went to the bank with Jennifer's old ID. Very resourceful, just like someone else I know. Karen's voice was warm. Robert, she read them. Both kids did. And they want to talk to you. I don't know if that's a good idea. Their parents are in prison for 3 more years. I have full custody, and these kids deserve to know their grandfather. She paused. Emma asked me directly, did Grandpa really try to hurt us, or did Mom and Dad lie? I told her the truth. That you loved them, that their parents made terrible choices, and that you've always wanted to be part of their lives. We talked for an hour. Karen arranged for a phone call first, then possibly a visit if it went well. The next week, I sat in my condo with my phone, heart pounding like I was about to make the biggest business presentation of my life. Grandpa? Emma's voice was older, more tentative than I remembered. Hi, sweetheart. I've missed you so much. I missed you too. Mom and Dad said you were mean, that you tried to take our house, that you wanted to hurt them. But I read your letters. You said they were lying. They were lying, Emma. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to protect myself from people who were trying to hurt me. Even if those people were your own son? The question hit hard. Even then, sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most hurt us the worst. That doesn't mean we have to let them. We talked for 40 minutes. Tyler got on briefly. He was younger, more confused about everything, but Emma asked real questions. About what had happened, about why I'd fought back instead of just giving them money, about whether I hated her parents. I don't hate them, I said honestly. I'm angry at what they did. I'm sad about who they became. But hate? That takes too much energy. I'd rather focus on building a good life. Aunt Karen says you started a foundation to help old people who get hurt by their families. I did, because what happened to me happens to a lot of people, and they deserve help. That's cool, Grandpa. That's really cool. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I might never have a normal grandfather relationship with Emma and Tyler. Too much damage, too much lost time. But maybe, eventually, we could build something. Not what it would have been, but something real nonetheless. Meanwhile, Marcus and Jennifer's lives had crumbled completely. I heard updates through Jim's occasional contacts with the prison system and through Karen. Marcus had been in 2 fights, spent time in solitary, and lost his chance at early parole. Jennifer had tried to file for divorce, but Marcus contested it, so they remained legally married. 2 people who'd destroyed each other trapped together, even in prison. Their house had sold at foreclosure for 60 cents on the dollar. Their possessions were in storage, accumulating fees they couldn't pay. Marcus's name was permanently attached to elder abuse, making future employment nearly impossible. Jennifer's marketing career was over. No one would hire someone convicted of fraud. The $600,000 restitution judgment was garnishing their prison wages. Pennies on the dollar, but the debt would follow them forever. They'd declared bankruptcy, but the criminal restitution wasn't dischargeable. They'd be paying it off for the rest of their lives. Karen told me Jennifer had tried to contact me several times, letters that Jim intercepted per my instructions. She's desperate, Karen said. Keeps talking about how unfair the sentence was, how she was just trying to provide for her kids, still not taking responsibility. I said. Some people never learn. I'd occasionally wonder if I should feel guilty about how thoroughly their lives had been destroyed. But then I'd remember those messages, the casual cruelty, the laughter about manipulating old people, the calculated plan to drug me, lock me away, steal everything I'd worked for. They'd made their choices. I'd simply refused to be their victim. One evening, Frank and I were having dinner at a steakhouse, the same place we'd eaten a year ago when everything was still uncertain. "You look good, Robert," Frank said, raising his glass. "Happy, at peace. I am. I got my life back. Hell, I got a better life. I'm doing work I love, traveling, spending time with people I care about. Marcus and Jennifer tried to take everything, and instead they gave me permission to rebuild however I wanted." "To second chances," Frank said. "To fighting back," I corrected, "and winning." We clinked glasses, and I meant it. This wasn't the life I'd planned. I'd expected to spend my 70s quietly, maybe spoiling grandchildren, maintaining the status quo. Instead, I'd been forced to fight, forced to prove myself, forced to rebuild from scratch. But the life I'd built was mine. Truly, completely mine. No one else's plans or expectations or manipulations. Just me, at 74, living fully and freely in a way I never had before. Marcus and Jennifer had tried to steal my future. Instead, they'd given me one worth living. And that, more than any legal victory, was the ultimate proof that I'd won. So that's my story. That's how I went from a bed in a psychiatric ward to standing in a Tuscan vineyard, free and happy at 74 years old. If you're listening to this and you're facing something similar, if someone you trust is exploiting you, manipulating you, trying to take what's yours, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to stay silent. You don't have to protect people who are hurting you, even if they're family. Document everything. Find a lawyer you trust. Report it to the authorities. Fight back. Will it be hard? Yes. Will it be painful? Absolutely. Will people try to convince you to just give in, to keep the peace, to forgive and forget? every single day. But here's what I learned. Your dignity is worth fighting for, your autonomy is worth protecting, and the people who truly love you will never ask you to sacrifice either one. So I'm asking you, what would you do if you discovered your own child, your own family, was planning to steal from you, to lock you away, to erase everything you'd built? Would you fight? Or would you let them win? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Share your own story if you're comfortable. Let's support each other, because elder abuse thrives in silence, and we need to make some noise. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to my channel. I'll be sharing more stories about people who fought back against exploitation, who refused to be victims, who proved that age doesn't mean weakness. And if you know someone who might be facing elder abuse, share this video with them. Let them know they're not alone. Let them know that fighting back is possible. Let them know that justice exists even when it seems impossible. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, you're never too old to stand up for yourself. You're never too old to fight. You're never too old to win. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never, ever let anyone steal your voice.